Today's talk is about how to receive money, especially investment capital, although the concepts we're going to talk about today apply in general. So early on in this sequence, in this series, we talked about how money is words and how we use money to symbolize those words. So really, plain and simple, when you're receiving money, you're receiving words. And sometimes people ask me, Mark, like, what's the right thing? What do I have to say to get the money from people? I'm trying to raise money and they just doesn't work. And what am I doing wrong? What am I saying wrong? And it's not so much what you're saying. It's that you're not receiving. So let's look at it this way. When you're talking, you're sending words out. And that's useful for, say, getting attention, right? If you look at the principles of basic marketing, you're trying to get the attention of somebody that might not have ever heard of you, bringing them into your world. But once you have their attention, you want to really change the conversation and let them lead. And this is where a lot of entrepreneurs really drop the ball, because there's an old joke. It says, how do you know if an entrepreneur is pitching? His lips are moving. And what that really means is that when you hang out with entrepreneurs, a lot of times they're just constantly talking about themselves, trying to get money that way. So let's break it down in a few little parts. If we think of marketing, these days now, we're pretty familiar with two major online platforms, Google and Facebook. So when you go to Google, you're going to go there to find something that you want. You're searching, you're drawing information to you. And I call that pull marketing, because you put in some search terms and maybe some ads come up, or some optimized websites come up that are attempting to answer your question that you're asking with your search terms. So that's pull marketing. The person is trying to pull information to them. And if you're on Facebook, you're probably trying to do something useful, like watch, get news from your friends or whatever you're doing. And then Facebook is trying to jam information into your space that you really don't want and don't care about in general. And that's called push marketing. So they're trying to push that information into your space. And you can even see how that feels. That feeling of, oh, those ads, it's like more. I don't want that, right? Because it's being pushed. Whereas when you go to Google and you search for something, you find something you want, it's like, hey, great. I was looking for this, and look what I got. I got what I wanted. So you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to raise capital, maybe put together a pitch deck, or you're in a conversation. And really, the conversation is a good place to start. Pitch decks are a fancy way of getting attention. It's a marketing piece, and the purpose of that deck is to open a conversation. But that conversation could happen anywhere, and you want to be ready to receive at any time. So how does that work? Well, let's say you're just at like a dinner party or something, or some gathering, and a friend comes up to you and they say, hey, what are you up to? And you say, well, funny you ask, I'm raising money for my company. I've never done it before. Now, most entrepreneurs will not stop at that point. That's a good place to stop. That's a piece of information. It's a little, it's kind of non-trivial. It's not really exactly small talk. You're kind of dropping a little conversation, a little piece of words into the space. And what you're really trying to do is see if there's some interest there. How do you know if there's interest? Well, you stop talking and you listen to see what the other person says. Now, if the person is, so you just did a little push marketing there. You pushed that little bit of information in the space. And if the other person, if it strikes them as interesting, they'll say, really? Tell me more about that. I didn't even know you had a company. What are you doing? Now they're drawing information to you. Now they're leading the conversation. Unfortunately, what happens with most entrepreneurs is that somebody asks some piece of small talk, and then the entrepreneur answers with just a non-stop, never-ending pitch. And meanwhile, the other person, they lost interest at the very first sentence, or even if they had interest, they're losing interest because they're not being heard. And we all want to be heard. In conversations, we want to be listened to. Now, if we think of the end point is the investor taking money out of their bank account and entrusting it with you. They're giving you their most valuable words. Where does that start? How do you get to that point? Well, if they can't trust you in small talk, how would they trust you with the most important words? So again, we go back to the beginning of that conversation. You're putting a little bit of information out. If they don't ask, if they don't follow up, that means that it didn't hit. That's the end. But if they ask a question, then you just answer that. And that's how the conversation goes. An investor will ask you one question, and your goal as the entrepreneur is just to answer that question. Don't elaborate. And we all want to elaborate. We all want to drill down and give them all the details. But when you're doing that, you're not actually granting them their own intelligence and their own wisdom to ask you what matters to them. And you've got to assume, as long as they're asking questions, they're interested. And they're trying to qualify, right? You told them at the very beginning you're raising money. Now they're exploring to see what would it be like to invest in you. So that's how you receive money, is you receive the words. And the more you can listen, the more you'll be able to hear where the conversation is going. And of course you can steer it here and there, but it's much more of an interplay. It's a building of trust. And suddenly fundraising becomes a very enjoyable experience for both parties because there's really no pressure. Now, one of the things that leads us to feel pressure is the perceived scarcity of money. And that we cover in a number of different ways in a number of different videos. There isn't any scarcity of money because there's no scarcity of words and emotions, right? We make it. We made money up as human beings. So as a result, we can't have a scarcity of it because it's not a physical item in the first place that can run out. So there you have it. That's really the process in a nutshell. Thanks for listening, and if you have any questions, put them down below, or feel free to go to the website, send emails, whatever it takes to get your questions answered. Thanks again.